leading up to today's message, I had probably no less than 3 or 4 different ideas on what I wanted to talk about. And today's message is not any of them. So I can only pray that Yahweh gave me this word for the benefit of you here. So I pray that something blesses you here. This was kind of very last minute kind of thrown together for me. So we're just going to roll with it and see how it goes. Today we're going to take a little walk along this journey we call life. And this is kind of a precursor to talking about the Holy Spirit, which is, of course, tomorrow is Pentecost. So I want to talk more about just our journey on how we become believers and how we kind of journey along as believers. Life is filled with twists and turns, and I'm sure you all know that, right? Things never go the way that we want it to. Just when we think everything's smooth sailing, we get hit with a curveball, and then we end up babysitting kids and doing whatever else. And life is always moving. It's always constant. It's like an ocean. Sometimes there's smooth sailing, sometimes it's calm waters, and other times it feels like turmoil. There's just waves, and we're rocking, and the boat's rocking, and we're crying out, and then Yeshua comes up and he goes, "Be still," and it just all settles down, right? Anyhow, that's what I'm hoping for in my life, and I'm sure that some of you are hoping for the same. So when we start off in this world, we are babies, both literally and spiritually. We are brand new to everything. We are new to our faith. We are new to experiences of the world. Getting to see things for the first time and taste things and hear things, So we start off as babies. And that is the beginning of our journey in this world. But at some point, we have to make a decision. And that is when we want to start on Yah's journey for us. Because there's a very big difference between the journey of someone who's in the world and then the journey of a believer, right? So we're going to mainly be in Genesis today. We're starting in the beginning. And so Genesis chapter 11 is where we will start. Most of the verses will be in Genesis. And today we are focusing on Abram. So if any of you are taking notes, my title for today's message is Abram to Abraham. And so we will kind of go along and see how this all ties together. Again, we're going to start in Genesis chapter 11, verse 29 to 31. It says, "Then Abram and Nahor took wives. The name of Abram's wife was Sarai, the name of Nahor's wife Milcah, and daughter of Haran, the father of Milcah, and the father of Iscah." I don't know how to say these names. "But Sarai was barren, she had no child." That's an important note. "And Terah took his son Abram and his grandson Lot, the son of Haran, and the daughter-in-law of Sarai, his son Abram's wife, and they went out with them from Ur of the Chaldeans to go to the land of Canaan, and they came to Haran and dwelt there." So, 2 interesting notes. This is post-Tower of Babel, so this is when people are starting to spread out more into the world. For those of you who don't know, man decided that they were going to try and reach the heavens, and so they started constructing this tower. And Yahweh confused their languages, and so that is where we get our languages of the world. And so he caused everyone to speak a different language so they couldn't communicate together. And so from there, people started spreading out. And so this is a little time after that, and where Abram and his wife and his brother, and they are starting to go out. They're spreading. Yahweh is telling them to go from their homeland, their original home, to somewhere new. This is also the first mention of Abram, is chapter 11. That's your first mention of Abram in the Bible. So this is his beginning. So again, he takes his wife to go from Ur to Canaan. And thinking through today's message, I was very much reminded of the story of Pilgrim's Progress. Has anyone read it? You know what I'm talking about? Okay. Pilgrim's Progress is an amazing story about the character of Christian, and he starts off on this journey. And so he lives in a sinful city and is called, he wants to try and reach what is essentially heaven. And so everything is very symbolic and personified in the book. But he starts off along this journey, and I see some similarities to kind of Abram's journey, where he is called to depart from his homeland to the unknown. And that's really what it is. When we step onto Yah's journey, we are called to leave home, we are called to leave our comfort zone and to venture into the unknown. And that is often the hardest part of it all for us, because as people, we get very comfortable. We get very settled into our ways, And I know I'm the exact same way. I have certain days where I like to have a certain meal, and I like to go through a certain routine throughout the week, and it becomes very organized, and a pattern, even in church, we have the same exact structure every week, and we all know what the structure is going to be. We start with announcements and prayer, and we go through 4 songs, and then scripture, and then open time, and then the message, 2 songs, and closing prayer. And we know the structure. Are we mixing it up, Naomi? Yeah. Oh, okay. We're mixing it up a little bit. But overall, we fall into routine as people. And we get very comfortable with that again. And so stepping onto Yah's journey is a call to leave the comfort and venture into the unknown. So we're going to keep going along Abram's journey, and we're going to go through essentially his entire journey through the Bible, or through Genesis. So the next one is drop down to chapter 12. We're going to go through verses 1 through 9. Now Yahweh had said to Abram, "Get out of your country, from your family, and from your father's house, to a land that I will show you, and I will make you a great nation." This is the first time Yahweh mentions this, and he mentions this phrase, "I will make you a great nation," many times that we'll read today. "I will make you a great nation. I will bless you and make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse those who curse you. And in all the families of the earth shall be blessed." So Abram departed as Yahweh had spoken to him, and Lot went with him, and Abram was 75 years old when he departed from Haran. Now, in Bible times, he was young. That was still young. People lived to be 400, 500, 600 years old still. So really, Abram's still young. But in today's society, that sounds kind of, I don't want to use the term old, but I'll use it, it sounds old to us, But really, in Bible times, you could equate it to someone in their 20s, 30s, starting out in life, journeying out somewhere. All right, verse 5. Then Abram took Sarai his wife and Lot his brother's son and all the possessions that they gathered and the people whom they had acquired in Haran. They departed to go to the land of Canaan. So they came to the land of Canaan. And Abram passed through the land to the place of Shechem, as far as the terebinth tree of Moreh. And the Canaanites were in the land. And then Yahweh appeared to Abram and said, "To your descendants I will give this land." And there he built an altar to Yahweh who appeared to him. And he moved from there to the mountains east of Bethel, and he pitched his tent with Bethel on the west and Ai to the east. There he built an altar to Yahweh and called upon the name of Yahweh. So Abram journeyed, going on still toward the south. Yah's journey starts with a step of faith on our behalf. And that's exactly what Abram had to do here. Again, he's venturing somewhere he doesn't know. And, he's taking his wife and his brother and their possessions, and that's it. He's packing up his life and he's moving somewhere else. Yah's journey starts with stepping out in faith. And faith that Yah knows the ultimate plan and that we are traveling along his path for us. The other thing Abram had to do was to trust in Yah's promise, which again is in verse 7, saying, "To your descendants I will give this land." That is a promise that Yahweh makes to Abram, and Abram has to just trust it, just go with it, that somehow, some way, he's going to make it happen, despite the fact that he's already 75 years old and he has no children. So, and Yahweh's promising him this, something that is so grand and seems impossible to him. Trust is often the hardest part on our journey. Trusting that Yahweh knows best. Trusting that He can do it better than we can. Trusting that we just have to walk in faith. We see one piece of the puzzle. I was going to bring a puzzle with me, and I totally forgot about it. But imagine if you took a jigsaw puzzle and just stared at one little piece. How hard would it be to comprehend what the full picture is, right? That one piece is often our life. Yahweh lets us see just what that one piece. And from there, we often like to make our own guesses. We often like to say, well, it's probably going to be this in the end, and so I'm just going to do it that way. But in reality, Yahweh sees the whole puzzle. He sees the complete picture. Where we start off in our life, we only see what's in front of us, And Yahweh sees from the beginning to the end, and He knows the journey the entire way. So that's where that trust comes in. And I promise you that nearly every time you will be pushed out of your comfort zone and into the unknown. And that has been most of my life's journey, is Yahweh, or me telling Yahweh, here's my comfort zone. I like this little box that I'm in, and I want to stay here. And Yahweh goes, what box? And He destroys it. And that's been a lot of my life, in my journey so far. I'm sure many of you can relate. But again, we just have to trust, and we have to have faith when we venture out into the unknown. All right, let's keep going here. Chapter 13. We're going to read verses 14 to 18. And Yahweh said to Abram, after Lot had separated from him, lift your eyes now and look from the place where you are, northward, southward, eastward, and westward. For all the land which you see I give to you and your descendants forever. We hear it again. And I will make your descendants as the dust of the earth, so that if a man can number the dust of the earth, then your descendants also could be numbered. Arise, walk through the land, through its length and width, for I give it to you. Then Abram moved his tent and went and dwelt by the terebinth trees of Mamre, which are in Hebron, and built an altar there to Yahweh. Up until this point, Abram is, quote unquote, an ordinary guy. He's nothing really special. He's someone who believes in Yahweh, loves his wife, but that's it. He's ordinary, as many people would see him. There's nothing superb, there's nothing super crazy about him. And yet Yahweh chooses him. And I'm sure that he was questioning things along the way, like, why is Yahweh picking me to do this? Why am I the one who's got to pack up my life and move somewhere else? And hear about some crazy far-fetched promise that I don't know will ever happen. I'm sure he questioned things, but that is Yahweh's specialty. Yahweh uses quote-unquote ordinary people for extraordinary things. And we tend to see that over and over and over throughout the Bible. Taking a little boy who's maybe barely a teen and helping him kill a giant. Someone completely ordinary who's overlooked by even his own family. By taking someone who was just dedicated to the temple like Samuel and calling his name, audibly calling his name and calling him as a prophet. Yahweh continually chooses quote-unquote ordinary people to do extraordinary things. Because at the end of the day, it's not about the person. It's not about who they are or where they were born or how much money their family has or anything like that, but it's about what Yahweh can do through them. And I promise you that Yahweh's plan, likewise, for you is not small or unimportant. I think believers often struggle with ordinary. We want to be accepted. And as contradictory as it may sound, I think that I see a lot of believers wanting to be accepted by the world. They want to fit in. They don't want to be looked at as weirdos, or outcasts or freaks. A lot of believers want to fit in. despite us being called to do the exact opposite. And so a lot of times we settle into this place of conformity, of normity, of ordinary. And that's where we decide to reside. When Yahweh's saying, I don't want you to do that, I don't want you to sit here and just merely be comfortable in life. I want you to get out and to leave your homeland and journey into the unknown with me. And I want you to become someone better and greater than you could have ever imagined. Because again, it is not our role to be accepted. It is not our role to be accepted by society. We are called here to stand out and to make a change and to make a difference. And you can't make a difference if you continue to go with the norm, right? If you go with the status quo, then nothing will ever change. You have to break away from that. You have to do something different. You have to step out in that faith and into the unknown. I've talked about this before, but I've struggled with my salvation story, in the sense that I view my own salvation story, or I did view my own salvation story as ordinary for a very long time. And I've met other believers who are like that. I've heard from young people, in youth groups and different things like that. I don't have any crazy story. I grew up in the church. I literally was born here on the property. Not born here. I was raised here on the property. Daniel was born here on the property. But we were raised in the church, and so I've heard from people before. I don't have some kind of crazy story. I didn't get into drugs and go through violence and get locked up and then get saved. And I don't have some crazy salvation story like some people have. But there's nothing wrong with the story that you have, And that's something that I had to come to terms with just growing up, because as odd as it sounds, I wanted to have a story that was a little different. There was something special that I could maybe use to help people with, Instead, I have this, the story that I did. And that's not to say that I went through life completely struggle-free, because I didn't. And so those struggles that I did go through, Yahweh used or helped me use to reach out to others and to impact other people's lives. And so just if it's something you've ever thought about before, you do not have a merely ordinary salvation story. All of our stories are different, and they are all important in some kind of way. And no two stories are exactly alike. There's going to be some kind of difference. And growing up, as you get older and as you learn more, you have different struggles along the way. You learn different lessons along the way. And each of those things shape you into the person that Yahweh wants you to be. So just don't ever think that you have an ordinary story. All right, we're going to flip it to Genesis chapter 15. I'm going to keep going along Abram's story here. And this is more about Yah's promise, his covenant, and more about what this promise is. So we're going to read verses 1 through 7. After these things, the word of Yahweh came to Abram in a vision, saying, "Do not be afraid, Abram. I am your shield, your exceedingly great reward." I like the shield here because it made me think about our armor. And so Yahweh is our protector. He's our shield. But Abram said, "Yahweh Elohim, what will you give me, seeing as I go childless, and the heir of my house is Eliezer of Damascus?" So it's someone else. It is supposed to be Abram's heir when he dies, because he doesn't have children still. Then Abram said, "Look, you've given me no offspring. Indeed, one born in my house is my heir." And behold, the word of Yahweh came to him, saying, "This one shall not be your heir, but one who will come from your own body shall be your heir." Then he brought him outside and said, Look now toward heaven, and count the stars if you are able to number them. And he said to him, "So shall your descendants be." And he believed Yahweh, and he counted it to him for righteousness. Then he said to him, "I am Yahweh, who brought you out of Ur of the Chaldeans to give you this land to inherit it." So again, we hear more talking about the inheritance here, and more about what I see as the impossible promise. This is something that, even though Abram says he believes it, it still seems unlikely. It still seems difficult, at least from our mortal point of view, our humanly point of view. And so I feel like there are times where Yahweh gives us what seems like impossible promises. It tells us things that seem like there's no way that could ever possibly be true. And that's where we have to step out into faith. And we have to have that trust and to follow Him. The sand and stars seem infinite, and that is what is described as how many descendants of Abram will be. And again, right now it is still just him and his wife, and that's it. They have servants and stuff, but as far as their immediate family, it's just the two of them still. I don't know if you've ever gone to a beach, but can you imagine sitting there and trying to count how many grains of sand there are, on just a little beach alone? It's infinite, and that's Yahweh is telling Abram here that my promise might seem to you impossible, but it is not possible through me. And the same is true for us when we get these promises from Yahweh. And when He tells us things, like I will never leave you nor forsake you, And there are times where you might feel like you are alone. You might feel like Yahweh's abandoned you, but that is not true, because that is His promise. And His word does not break. It does not change. It does not falter. And so those are promises. His word is filled with promises, not just to the people of the time in the Bible, but promises to us as well. And all those promises remain. All right, let's keep going. Genesis chapter 16. We're going to flip over. Verses 10 through 12. Then the angel of Yahweh said to her, I will multiply your descendants exceedingly, so that they shall not be counted for multitude. And the angel of Yahweh said to her, this is Sarai, Abram's wife, behold, you are with child. Or, this is not Abram's wife, I'm sorry. This is Hagar. Okay. A little backstory in case you don't know. Sarai, Abram's wife, doubted the promise. She doubted that it could actually happen. So she told Abram, here, take my servant Hagar and conceive a baby with her instead, because maybe she's the one that can give you this promise, because Sarai doubted it. And so now we come down here to verse 11. And the angel of Yahweh said to her, behold, you are with child, and you shall bear a son. You shall call his name Ishmael, because Yahweh has heard your affliction. He shall be a wild man. His hand shall be against every man, and every man's hand against him. And he shall dwell in the presence of all his brethren. I see what Sarai did here maybe is a sort of a shortcut. She didn't believe that what Yahweh said was true. She was already thinking, I'm too old to have a baby, and so she decided to take a shortcut. Instead of waiting for Yahweh's time, decided again to kind of cut through life and make a way around that.
Take matters in your own hands.
Right, take matters into your own hands. And so then we see here that this son is not the son of promise. He's a wild man, and his hand shall be against him. Everyone's going to be against him. So this is not the son of promise. And so the obvious lesson here to me is don't try and take shortcuts through life. Don't think that we can do things better than Yahweh. Don't try and opt out of things. Don't try and maybe cut around Yahweh a little bit and say, well, I'm kind of just going to ride the edge a little bit, and kind of do what he's saying, kind of not. Look at Jonah. Jonah thought, well, I could just hop on a ship and get out of here. I can just avoid Yahweh by sailing away. And he ended up, right where Yahweh wanted him in the end. And so he went the long way, the hard way around, instead of just obeying Yahweh's plan, right? And so don't try and take shortcuts. This, to me, also has made me think about kind of people's attention span, how we want things now. We have this instant gratification mentality in the world today.
Yes.
So I looked up an interesting fact. Back in about the 30s and 40s, the average movie scene that you would see was about 12 seconds long. Today's movie scene is approximately 2.5 seconds long. So that should give you an idea of how much culture has changed and how much people want things now. I have to have it now. People's attention span is very short. They want a little bit, and then 2 seconds later you're on to something else, and it's constantly moving and constantly going. Movie shots have more than doubled from when they started because people want it now, and that's this kind of mentality of taking shortcuts. I don't want to wait for what Yahweh is telling me. I don't have the time to wait. I'm already too old. I can't wait for what He's promising me. I'm going to take matters in my own hands and cut around that and do it my way instead. But Yahweh always keeps His promises. But, there's a but. He always keeps His promises, but they are in His own time. And that is the hard lesson. That is the hard thing for us to accept. Again, because we want things now. And if Yahweh promises you, I'm going to do something, then He's going to do it. But it's not going to be when you want it. And there's nothing you can do to change that. We have to simply learn to wait for Yahweh's promise to be fulfilled. There's a big lesson in patience, and you could preach many messages on that. All right, let's keep going along our journey here. We're going to flip over to chapter 17. Guess where I went. This is, again, more about the covenant. We're going to read verses 1 through 5. When Abram was 99 years old, so when we started our journey, the first time we hear Abram is 75. Well, now he's 99. And so he's starting to get a little older. Time is passing despite the few chapters we've gone through. When Abram was 99 years old, Yahweh appeared to Abram and said to him, I am Almighty. I am the Almighty. Walk before me and be blameless. I will make my covenant between me and you will multiply you exceedingly. And here he says it again. I feel like every couple years Yahweh just spoke up and said, I'm going to give you descendants, but not yet. You got to keep waiting. Verse 3. Then Abram fell on his face and Yah talked with him, saying, As for me, behold, my covenant is with you, and you shall be a father of many nations. No longer shall your name be Abram, but you shall be Abraham, for I have made you a father of many nations. I had a kind of interesting revelation reading this on Abram to Abraham. And it kind of made me see that Abram's name change from Abram to Abraham was, in a sense, it was like Abraham's baptism. And so that is what happens to us. And so that's a little revelation Yahweh kind of gave to me. And I think it's really cool. When you're baptized, you enter the water as one person. And up to this point, Abram was still a follower of Yahweh. He still loved Yahweh. He still talked to Yahweh. He was still a believer. But Yahweh had something more in store for him. And before that could happen, there had to be a radical change in Abram's life. And so he changed his name to Abraham. And so in the same way, before you're baptized, you are still a believer. You've accepted Yahweh into your heart. You're still following on His path, and you love Yahweh. But then you go into the water, and you come out as a new creation, a new person. So I see his name change as Abraham's baptism, way before it ever happened. So I don't know if that strikes you as cool, but I liked thinking about that and the little revelation Yahweh gave me. Because again, you are a different person after truly committing to follow Yahweh. And that's what that importance is. And maybe not physically, maybe you don't change your name or your appearance changes, although people should be able to see that you are different, but it's more of a spiritual change that's happening here. And so, again, people should be able to look at you and say, something's different, And I've had that happen a couple times in my life. And when I was in college, I was taking some criminal justice classes, and I had this guy come up to me kind of randomly after class, and he's like, "Are you a Christian?" And I was like, yeah, I am. He's like, I could just tell. And so we're still friends to this day. It's been a couple years now, but it should be something that is visible on us. Like Abram's name change to Abraham was something very obvious, And for the people who knew him, okay, he has a different name. In a sense, he is a different creation. A little note here, Abram was 86 years old when Ishmael was born. And he was about 99 years old when his son Isaac was born. So think about that. And again, when we started in chapter 11, he was 75. It's been a long time. Even from Ishmael to Isaac, it is over 13 years to see Yah's promise. And so he's waited a long, long time. And I'm not saying you're going to have to wait that long for things to happen, but again, this is about Yahweh's timing. This is not about our timing. This is not about our instant gratification. This is Yahweh's timing. And so, again, we see here through the verses we've read that every couple years, more than likely, Yahweh comes in and reminds Abram, I'm going to make you descendants, like the sands, like the stars in the sky. And so he continues to remind him up until the time that it actually happens. And so, again, that is our lesson in patience on waiting over 13 years to see something fulfilled. And sometimes we have to wait far longer than we'd like. And that's when we should be crying out to Yahweh. And, Yahweh, just give me a little reassurance that I'm still on your path, that your promise is still coming, that I have to stay strong, but I'm still waiting. And Yahweh speaks out and says, you're doing good, keep going. And so that's what I like to think. All right, we're going to skip ahead a couple chapters to chapter 22. Chapter 22, verses 1 through 3. So this is now some years later, and the son of promise was born. And then we come to chapter 22, and it says, Now it came to pass after these things, in verse 1, that Yah tested Abraham, and said to him, Abraham. And he said, Here I am. And he said, Take now your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah, and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains of which I shall tell you. So Abraham rose early in the morning and saddled his donkey, took 2 of his young men with him, and Isaac his son. And he split the wood for the burnt offering, and arose and went to the place of which Yahweh had told him. I don't know about you, but I don't know that I could have the strength to do that. Abraham didn't know that Yahweh was testing him. He was ready to go through it all. And Abraham was truly ready to sacrifice his only son, his son of the promise, the son that he waited over 13 years for, and now Yahweh's saying, give him as an offering back to me. I don't know that I could have had the strength to do that. But Abraham was ready to do it. And so there's a couple things that we can learn here, and I've got a couple verses to go with them. The first one is that sometimes things happen that only Yahweh understands. Sometimes Yahweh tells us to do things, and we are not going to see why. We are blind to the outcome of the situation, and Yahweh says, I need you to go do this for me. And a lot of times I know I've questioned it, or made excuses, Yahweh, I don't know about that, and it's usually, for me, it's Yahweh wants me to go pray for somebody or go to talk to somebody. And my immediate answer is Yahweh, I'm too shy, I'm too quiet for that. I don't want to do that, but he says, no, you got to do it. You have to do it. And the Holy Spirit pushes and prods in my heart until I feel like I have no other option. But sometimes things happen that only Yahweh truly understands. The verse I have for this is in Isaiah. You don't have to flip there if you don't want to, but it's Isaiah 55, verses 8 and 9. And this is one of my favorite verses. It says, For my thoughts are not your thoughts, nor are nor your ways my ways, says Yahweh. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so my ways are higher than your ways, and my thoughts are higher than your thoughts.
Hallelujah.
So here Yahweh's talking to Isaiah, but I've used this verse a lot of times talking to people where they want to know, why did this have to happen? And usually it's us questioning the bad in life. Why did someone have to die? Why did I have to get hurt? Why did someone get sick? Or why did this happen? Why did I flunk school or whatever it may be? And it's usually us questioning the bad. And so I often point them to this verse that simply says, Yahweh is above us. His ways are so much higher. He is infinite. We can't begin to understand, a fraction of what he knows and what he sees, And so because of that, we have to, again, trust that we just follow his path, follow the journey that he's given us. All right, the next one, if you'd like to turn there, is Psalms 119, verse 105. We're not reading the whole 119. But this verse is another very simple verse. And the next lesson here that Yahweh, I believe, is teaching Abraham in sacrificing his son is that we may be blind having faith. We may walk through faith with blind, not knowing the outcome, but Yahweh always makes sure to light our way. So I'm sure a lot of you have heard this verse, Psalms 119, 105. Your word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path. So again, we may walk through life, we might walk through our journey blind, but Yahweh is our light. He continues to guide us and to show us where I go. Even if it's only enough to see one step in front of the other. He's still lighting our path. And so as long as we stay on his path, we will have that light. The next thing that I believe Yahweh was teaching Abraham here was that he wants our all, no matter how hard it may seem. And the verse for this will be in Luke chapter 5, if you'd like to flip there. Yahweh wants our all, no matter how hard it may seem. And again, this is his only true 100% son. This is his only son. This is the son of promise that he's waited all these years for. This is the one that's supposed to make his descendants great and to become many nations. And Yahweh, again, is asking him to sacrifice him. As you're all flipping to Luke chapter 5, I'm going to read Genesis 22:16 quick. That simply says, where am I here? By myself I have sworn, says Yahweh, because you've done this thing, and you've not withheld your son, your only son. So this is after Yahweh spares Isaac. Where Yahweh says, he's blessing him. He's saying, you were ready to give me your only son. You were not holding anything back from me. And that's exactly what Yahweh wants from us. He doesn't want us to hold anything back. And he wants us to give it our all, to pour everything out there. Again, Luke chapter 5, verse 27 and 28. So this is when Yeshua is picking up his disciples. And so we come to Matthew, the tax collector. And verse 27 says, after these things, he, Yeshua, went out and saw a tax collector named Levi sitting at the tax office. And he said to him, follow me. So he left all, rose up, and followed him. And so that's that key phrase there. He left all. He was ready to give it all up to follow Yeshua. And here, he probably doesn't know much more about Yeshua than stories that have been passed around. And he is essentially giving everything. He's dropping his life to follow a stranger. And in many ways, Yahweh wants that from us. He wants us to be willing to give everything that we have, every fiber of our being, every strength, every flaw. He wants it all. I didn't mean to rhyme there, but it worked. Another one is Luke 9. So just flipping a couple chapters further. Luke 9, verse 59. And it essentially is talking about the same thing here. Luke 9, 59. Then he, Yeshua, said to another, follow me. But he said, Lord, let me first go and bury my father. And so oftentimes, I think we tend to have those excuses when Yahweh says, I want you to come do this. And we say, well, first I got to do this other thing first. I got to go mow the lawn real quick. I got to take the dog for a walk. I got to do something else first. And so a lot of times people come with that kind of mentality of when Yahweh gives us something hard, when he presents us with something that we might not necessarily want to do, or that something that we find difficult to do, that's kind of our immediate reaction. Is, well, I've got something else first, and then I'll be along, But Yahweh says, no, I want you to drop it. I want you to give me your all and to come with me now. I want you to give me your all. And so that is that next lesson that he teaches Abraham. And Abraham, again, is ready to give his all. One of the final lessons here is that it's easier to say it than to do it. And that is especially true here in the story of Abraham, ready to sacrifice his son. It is often easy for us to say, I will do this, for Yahweh. Yahweh gives us something crazy and you say, sure, I could do that, Or if you've ever talked to somebody and way exaggerated what you can do, you're like, sure, I could jump 12 feet standing, I could do that. It's easy for us to say things. It's easier for us to claim that we can do things, even promise that we will do things, than it does for us to actually do it. But again, Abraham, and I'm sure he was scared. I'm sure he was nervous, and I'm sure he had doubts going through his head and questions. Yahweh, he finally gave me the son, and he's still a young man. He's still growing, and after all these years of waiting, and after all these promises, and now he wants me to sacrifice him. What? How am I supposed to do? I'm sure that he had a lot of these doubts and thoughts going through his head. But at the end of the day, I 100% believe that Abraham would have done it if that's really what Yahweh wanted. I'm sure that he still would have trusted in Yahweh and sacrificed his son if that's what it took. And that also was an indication of what Yahweh went through for us, right? Sending his son, his one and only son, to come and be a sacrifice for us. And it takes that kind of strength that maybe not a lot of people have. But Yahweh can give you that strength to do something that seems impossible, to do things that we probably maybe don't want to do. We're going to end Abraham's story, flipping back to Genesis, chapter 25. So this is the end of Abraham. We see here verses 7 and 8. Genesis 25, 7 and 8. And this is the sum of the years of Abraham's life, which he lived. So remember, he was 99 years old when Isaac came along. And says, he lived 175 years. Then Abraham breathed his last and died in a good old age, an old man full of years, and was gathered to his people. By the end, through everything, he was blessed. He was blessed with, another family after Sarah died, and blessed with just much more than he could possibly imagine, a good, long life. He had another 75 years that he lived after seeing the birth of his son. That's a long time. He was able to see his descendants, his kids and his grandkids, and so through trusting Yahweh, through having that faith on this blind journey that Yahweh presented to him, he was blessed in the end, and lived a long life, fulfilling life in service to Yahweh. Maybe one person's job to plant the seed. That's it. And you walk away. You never see the tree again. Maybe one person's job to pour some water on it, give it a little water to help it grow, and then they walk away and never see it again. One person's job to provide sunlight and to give it nutrients, and maybe one person's job to help prune it and guide it as it grows. We may never see the extent of what we're helping produce. We may never see the grown tree healthy with fruit, but that doesn't mean it doesn't matter. That doesn't mean it's not important, because we are still a part of that process that Yahweh has, and that's what I really just want you to understand here. John chapter 20. John 20, verses 28 and 29. I'm sure a lot of you know the story. This is after Yeshua was crucified and buried and rose again. And he appeared to all the disciples except for Thomas. And so the first time, and Thomas didn't believe. He didn't believe that Yeshua really came back. And so then we come here to verse 28. And Thomas answered and said to him, "My Lord and my God." And Yeshua said to him, "Thomas, because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed." Yeah. Our roles may be somewhat small in the grand scheme of things, but they are not unimportant in other people's lives. Again, we have different jobs to play. And so I encourage you, when you feel Yahweh speaking to your heart like that, to step out and do something that's way outside your comfort zone. Just trust Him and go for it. Because again, just because we don't see it doesn't mean it's not important. And here, none of us here have physically seen Yeshua, right? But how many of you believe in Him, right? Oh, yeah. We all believe. And here it says, "Blessed are those who have not seen and yet believe." So we are blessed merely because we believe in something that we have not seen. But I know that we all feel His presence. I know that we feel Him working through things. And we are all part of this journey of life from beginning to end. So to kind of recap, the most important thing is to have faith and trust, because those are the hard ones, is that blind trust. The next encouraging note is that you're never too old. All right? All right? Mark, you're not quite 99 yet, so, it may happen. That's what Yahweh wills. You're never too old to do things, so stop making excuses. Don't use that as an excuse. And I've talked about that before, about using your age, your height, your stature as excuses of why not to do things. Hold to Yah's promises. Even though we may never even see them come to pass, it doesn't mean He's not going to hold up His end of the bargain. Right? We have to have that faith. We have to trust in Him. And believe in His changing power, in His transforming power, like changing Abram to Abraham. And when we are baptized, coming out a new creation in Him. So, to end, if you are 5 years old, 50, or 500, it doesn't matter, because you are still on the journey that Yahweh has for you. You are still part of that journey. And so it may be hard sometimes to have faith, because we don't see what's going to happen next. And we have to trust in Him that He will be our light and He will guide our way.